Pastor Brian from Summit Church here. We had a congregational meeting last Sunday. I outlined our plan to transition some of our staff over the next year and a half and how that will affect our budget. There were about 85 people at the meeting who heard the plan and had the opportunity to ask questions about it. And now Summit Church is obviously a lot bigger than 85 people. We usually have over 300 on our Sunday morning worship services. We had 425 on Easter. Well, this plan will have a huge effect on the life of the church, so I want to take this opportunity to use our social media channels and the weekly e-news to inform those of you who weren't at the meeting about this plan. Transitioning our staff is the topic for this week's edition of Wednesday's Words with Pastor Brian. This video may be a little longer than most of the ones I do, so if you were at the meeting last Sunday, you've already heard this and you can just keep on scrolling without feeling bad about it. For those who didn't attend Sunday's meeting, I hope this is helpful information about what will be happening with our staff over the next year and a half. Several weeks ago, I shared with all of you that Craig Helmick, our production manager, had been given a job offer by another church. This particular church is one of the largest churches in our area with over 2,000 people. We currently pay Craig for just 10 hours a week. This church has offered him a full-time position at 30 hours a week. Craig is excellent at what he does. He's proven himself. In fact, let me put it this way. He's so good that one of the largest churches in town wants to hire him to do for them what he's currently doing for us. Well, I believe we should keep Craig here. Now, when Craig and I talked about this, I asked him an important question. I said, I can't guarantee we'll be able to match their offer, but suppose we could. Suppose you had the offer from that other church in front of you, and you had the same offer from Summit in front of you. Which one of those would you pick up? Now, that's an important question because it shows where his heart is at. And Craig said he'd prefer to stay here at Summit. That job offer is what originally started this process. The plan involves more than just Craig. When I became lead pastor here, I shared this before, I sat down with each of the current staff and asked them where they were at with their commitment to this church and where they thought they'd be in the next several years. When there's a turnover and change in leadership, there's oftentimes turnover. And so you don't take it personally, it's just the way it is. And Chad told me at that time he thought that he would leave our church in about 5 years. He said he'd be 60 years old at that point and didn't want to be the old guy trying to reach young people with modern music. He said he was going to pursue acting and some other avenues. Well, that was 4 years ago, so you can do the math. When I heard about Craig, I sat down with Chad again and asked him where he was at. And Chad said he thought he'd be gone in about a year and a half. Chad hasn't announced his resignation, but we know it's on the horizon. And our job as leaders is to plan for what we know is coming. So here's what we plan to do. Here's what we're doing. We are increasing Craig's job to 25 hours a week beginning this June 15th, with the understanding it will increase to 30 hours a week when we make the budget for 2025. Chad has agreed to reduce his rate by 15% to help pay for this while things are changing. When this transition is completed and Chad leaves, Craig's position will be 30 hours a week, and we will find another person whose sole job will be leading music on Sundays. That job will be around 10 to 12 hours a week. So in a sense, the number of hours we currently allocate to Chad's job and Craig's job will be switched at the end of this transition. The production job will be 30 hours and the music job will be part-time. In the meantime, we will still have both Chad and Craig on our staff, and this will cost more money. The good news is we have money in the bank to cover it. We generated some surpluses during the COVID years. A lot of ministries just didn't happen while things were shut down, and you all continued to give faithfully to the church. So we've been able to put aside some money into a savings account. We plan to use some of that savings over the next year and a half. This plan will increase our payroll budget by around $6,000 for the remainder of this year. And that's not a huge amount. The big expense will be in 2025. If nothing else changes, we will use about $25,000 of that savings account in next year's budget. It could be more depending on what happens with things like the cost of insurance. One of the natural questions here is what Craig will be doing with those extra hours. And this is where the transition involves even more people than just Chad and Craig. Melanie Palmer currently does most of our in-house communications. She does the graphic design for the images I use in the sermons, and she produces both the Sunday Bulletin and the weekly e-news. Melanie has said that she wants to get out of that role and focus on small groups. We do not currently have a small groups coordinator position I'd like to fill, and Melanie said she'd like to fill that role, making it easier for people at Summit Church to find and connect with one of our small groups. Craig will then pick up the in-house communications piece, and he'll also oversee the online presence of Summit Church. Craig will develop strategies for online outreach that really leverage our location at 5 Mile and Overland so that everyone within a 3-mile radius of the church knows we're here, and anyone using Google to search for a church finds us. He'll do this through advertising on social media sites like Facebook and Instagram, and also through search engine optimization. What this means is that adding Craig is really a strategic move for our future. The world has changed so that everyone we want to reach, they're online. And almost all of our visitors say they've been to our website and watched us online before ever showing up in person. It used to be that people's first impression happened when they drove into our parking lot and interacted with the greeting team. First impressions are now made online. I mean, many of us won't even go to a new restaurant without looking at the menu online first to see if there's anything we might be interested in. How much more important is choosing a church? And this means that we need to invest resources in online media to continue to grow and reach Southwest Boise with the gospel. That's really what this plan is about. We're going to use some of our savings to invest in the future and bridge the gap between where we are now and where we will be a year and a half from now. Here's the thing. If we don't keep Craig and he goes to that other church, we'll still need to hire someone to do that job, and they probably won't be as good at it as Craig is. That'd really be a step backwards. Plus, Chad will still be leaving in a year and a half anyway. It's better for us to look ahead and plan for where we want to be at that point and realize that God has already provided the financial resources to get us there. Now, that brings up one other thing I want you to be aware of. As we move ahead over the next year and a half, those bar graphs in the bulletin, they will reflect this decision. Now, that might seem obvious, but I think it's important to state this outright. Our expenses are going to be greater than our anticipated budget by upwards of $25,000 next year. Seeing that each week in the bulletin can have an effect on the morale of the church. We will show up each Sunday and see our budget falling further and further behind. We need to remember that this is an intentional decision for strategic reasons, and it's for a temporary period of time as we bridge the gap between our current staffing situation and where we will be a year and a half from now. Personally, I'm praying that we reach more people and grow during that time, with the result it doesn't affect our savings to the degree that we anticipate. But we all need to understand that we will see the effect of this decision each week on those graphs. I hope this is clear. I hope you all understand where we're going and why. Please come talk with me if you have questions or concerns. One of the mantras that you've heard me say many times is that ministry is always a reflection of leadership. Ministry is always a reflection of leadership, and that's true on a small scale, like a Sunday school class or a small group Bible study, but it's certainly true on a large scale, like the whole church and its staff. This plan will absolutely affect the ministry of Summit Church, and I believe it'll position us to be more effective at accomplishing our mission of reaching Southwest Boise with the gospel.